Hello and welcome to a live update from the studios of the Government Information Center. All right, that should be the Government Information Service. We are at the Information Command Center. I am Lisa Joseph and we're talking tourism this afternoon. We have in studio Minister for Tourism, Information, Broadcasting, Creative Industries, Honorable Dominic Fedee. Minister, thank you so much for coming in at very short notice for us to be able to have a discussion on some of the pressing issues with the tourism industry. We know that it is the lifeblood of St. Lucia's economy, as it is across the region. And at this time, tourism has taken quite a battering with the COVID-19 pandemic. This afternoon, our conversation will be broad-ranging, but more specifically, speaking to some of the concerns of the St. Lucia Hotel Tourism Association. There have been concerns expressed by the president regarding the sort of handling of the reopening of the tourism industry by the government. The president of the SLHTA, Ms. Caroline Trubetskoy, issued a statement, or rather, she wrote to the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Honorable Alan Chasney, and that letter has been published. And I will go through the letter so that we can have context to the conversation. And it reads, in a letter to Prime Minister Alan Chasney, SLHTA President Caroline Trubetskoy says that the recent mass redundancy announcement by two of St. Lucia's major hotels have sent shockwaves through the industry and are a stark reminder of the very precarious situation the hospitality and tourism industry finds itself in. Making reference to St. Lucia's June 4th reopening of borders, she expressed concern that the prescribed entry requirements created a stalemate between the airlines and the destination, delaying scheduled flights until further notice. She said, quote, "We urge your government to review these entry requirements urgently, especially in light of other Caribbean destinations now having opened or about to open and receiving visitors. It is a very real fear that the effect of this current stalemate will have consequences that will affect the industry for years to come, with airlift reduced to the bare minimum and not able to sustain the many businesses dependent on visitor arrivals. Hotels and tourism businesses cannot prepare, budget, invest in new protocols, and market efficiently without some certainty that those visitors willingly or visitors willing to travel right now and in the coming weeks and months can actually gain entry. The uncertainty continues to trigger cancellations and discourages new bookings. With each passing day, businesses find themselves nearer to bankruptcy and our hospitality workers nearer to permanent unemployment." End quote there by Caroline Trubetskoy. Minister, you are aware of this missive by the SLHTA president to Prime Minister Honorable Alan Chasney. What are your thoughts on the statement by Ms. Trubetskoy?
Well, I think that all over the world right now, people are extremely anxious about their business, about their investments. You know, I get the phone calls from employees, I get the phone calls and letters from even my own constituents who were previously working and earning a living for their families within the hotel environment. But Lisa, let's face this, we are going through a very difficult time. It's a health crisis that the world has never seen. And so what we have to do is, when we are contemplating opening, we've got to do so with the health and safety of the St. Lucian people first in mind. And so I think that we have indicated to hoteliers and in a more official capacity to the SLHTA that you know, we have to ensure that this is done well. Now, the protocols which they spoke of, I think we discussed it with the aviation sector, and it is a real fact that we may have to review those protocols. But I think that a statement that suggests that there's a lack of consultation is absolutely unfortunate, and I think it goes against the facts or the chronology of the events that have taken place. Because in the last 2 months, we've met with tourism-related organizations, including the SLHTA and various subsectors, 15 times. We've met even before the tourism industry was shut down in early March with the hotel sector to see exactly where they're at. We've met with the taxi sector, an important subsector of the industry. We've met with the board of the SLHTA to unveil our reopening plans. We formulated a task force of which 4 members of the SLHTA and also there are just 9 members, so 4 out of 9 members on the task force are actually bona fide SLHTA members, including the president and the CEO and another board member, Mr. Winston Anderson of Sandals, who are all on the task force. And so it is quite unfortunate that the SLHTA is now making the allegation that consultation has not taken place. This is further from the truth, and I want to debunk this as absolutely false.
No doubt that the requirements that we have in place for the visitors or anyone entering the island, not just for visitors, but even returning nationals, the quarantine and certainly the test that they require to get. A lot of noise has been made about the fact that the test cannot be found within a 48-hour period. Some individuals have indicated that they can get a 72-hour test done, but we are fixed on that 48 hours, so 2 days. Is there room, and you alluded to it, that maybe there can be some revision, but is there room for the government of St. Lucia to concretely reverse its position?
Well, absolutely. I think when we look at what has happened in Jamaica and Antigua, it clearly shows that the aviation sector does not find the pre-testing protocol to be very practical. But I think that you have to ensure whatever protocol that replaces that should not be done in a scurry, and it should not be done overnight, but it has to be done in a clinical manner, in a manner that is very calculated and measured. Because, you know, Lisa, if we got into the business of reopening and we didn't get it right, and we open up our borders to the epicenter of the virus, now the United States, where the numbers, instead of decreasing, are spiraling, and the public health situation seems to be overwhelmed by what is taking place. It would mean, therefore, that the risk is very, very grave, and you're endangering the workers of the industry, you're endangering the taxi drivers, you're endangering the entire population. When those workers go back to their communities, you can have overnight several cases of COVID. So what you're faced with is a very difficult situation, and we empathize with the hoteliers. They've got their plants that are shut down and revenues are not coming in, but now is not the time for anyone to push a panic button to suggest that let us hurry up and open whilst we endanger the lives of our people. The government has got a significant obligation to ensure that we provide livelihoods for our population, but as well to ensure that we safeguard their lives first and foremost. And so this is what we're doing. We're taking a very balanced approach. And we have been in dialogue with the airline industry to make sure that we do everything possible to work with the airlines. And I think that we're going to be making an announcement soon as to what the new protocols are going to be. But I don't think that we're going to be pushed or bullied into doing something that is not in the best interest of St. Lucia and St. Lucians.
What are your thoughts on whether we can go the route of Jamaica and Antigua that you alluded to just a moment ago? Because the testing will happen, but not necessarily pre-testing before boarding flights, but testing on island. Do you see that we will be able to have that capacity to do like Jamaica and Antigua?
We absolutely do. And those discussions have been taking place with the medical experts. You know, Lisa, there's no one that wants to see the industry return to its glory days than me. I have constituents who are on the breadline, who have lost their livelihoods. I am the Minister of Tourism. I want to see the numbers go up rather than down. But I've had to temper my enthusiasm, and I've had to temper my excitement and my aspirations in wanting to see tourism go forward in consideration for the best health, the best of our country. And I believe at this time, the best thing I can do and the tourism industry can do is really allow the health experts to take the lead. And so when I see the suggestion that the SLHTA would want to determine what the protocols are, I think that that is really, really, really sad and unfortunate. I think that we have to allow health to take the lead, and that is what's been happening all over the Caribbean. We've been listening to CARFA, we've been listening to PAHO, we've been listening to our CMO and the Ministry of Health to make sure that this works. And it has to be a continuous conversation to arrive at a place where not just tourism will win, but health will win, the economy will win, and St. Lucia will win.
Some now would ask, Minister, then why at all say that the tourism industry is reopened? Because we can't get the flights to come in, the hotels can't get the guests, and surely the workers can't go back to work. So why reopen? Why state that it's reopened and go on a reopening campaign?
Well, you've got to have aspirations and you've got to have targets. And our target was June 4th, and what we wanted to do was to have a phased opening, and that would have really guided us, because no one knows for sure how tourism in this new normal, how it is going to affect the health of the employees, how it is going to affect the bottom line of hoteliers, what sort of demand is there. There are projections based on bookings, but we see that as people come closer to the date, the bookings are falling off from hotels. We see that a lot of the bigger corporations around the world, that instead of having a full-fledged opening, they're opening a few of their plants rather than all of their plants. So there are so many unknowns that what you've got to do is to tread cautiously, because St. Lucia's reliance on tourism is too precious for us to open and to make mistakes. And so this is what we're saying, is to make sure that we open in the most responsible and clinical manner. Jamaica has opened, but not without issues. So in the first instance, they said no testing, everyone can come in without being tested. The population of Jamaica indicated that this is not something that they would like to see, and rightly so.
Because they did feel that it was lopsided, because
absolutely.
They were being asked for testing.
Correct.
And then the visitors were being allowed to come
Correct.
in. Yes.
And so we now must learn from this opportunity to say, well, how can we strike the right balance? There are going to be hundreds of St. Lucian nationals who will want to come in. And what do? Do we quarantine them while the tourists are coming in? All of these issues we've got to consider to ensure that we have a very fair and balanced situation for locals and tourists that are coming in, that we don't prejudice against the rights of any of the respective groups. But what we do is ensure we do something that all of us can win.
Now, the airlines themselves are facing their own financial hardships as a result of the pandemic, no doubt about that. So the question now becomes, what sort of pressures would that put on the government of St. Lucia? Because now airlines perhaps will be having the conversation of wanting to be subsidized. Is that considered? Has the government even begun to consider that they may now have to go that route with the airlines in order to have them fly to St. Lucia? Well,
thankfully, the airlines we've been talking to, we haven't seen that come up as a conversation. I think the airlines are happy to get back into the sky. You know, it's a little easier now to get airlift than normal, but one is not saying that this situation cannot change tomorrow, because everything we've seen from COVID is something that is extremely fluid. So what we're doing, Lisa, is we are very much inclined to open. We've had several meetings, several presentations and position papers. We've heard the industry, we've heard civil society, we've met with the opposition, unveil our plans to them to let them know what the thinking is and how we were going to approach the opening. And we've also had focus groups with the general public. So it's not an easy decision. It is one that you've got to make sure you get very, very right.
Mm-hmm. Is the wriggle room that you may have when it comes to the protocols, because that is the sticking point for the SLHTA, that the requirement for the test to be conducted. How much wriggle room do you believe you have in order to amend this protocol?
I think the protocol is likely to be amended. I think that we are going to lean in that direction, but it must be measured. There's a lot that you have to put in place, and once you put those things in place, then I think that it will require every ounce of innovation, every ounce of detail, and every ounce of meticulousness on the part of everyone to ensure that we have a destination that is properly managed in the best interest of all.
What are you hearing from the hoteliers about how long they can maintain the sort of position that they're in terms of having to go belly up? We've seen that for Coconut Bay in the south, that they have completely had redundancies of all staff, or most of the staff, the majority of the staff. So how much longer do you believe they can hold on?
I don't know. I haven't seen their books, but some of the off-the-record conversations I've had, I'd prefer not to delve into detail on this show because those conversations were off the record. But I think just to say that generally everyone is anxious, everyone is concerned about their businesses. But I think that there has been, by and large from hoteliers, a lot of understanding as to what we are being faced with and the need for there to be a new normal in tourism and the need for the protocols to be robust and rigorous to ensure that we have a situation where the staff are protected. I think government has done as much as it can to create the best enabling environment. So we've extended the severance pay requirement in the labor code in the last sitting of the House, where we've said that, you know, for a period of time, hotels, as we go through this pandemic, they are able now, rather than having to pay severance pay in 3 months' time, they can do so within 6 months' time, because we understand the gravity of the financial difficulties that would be afflicted or would have been imparted to a number of the hotels.
We're talking about land base here, but on the other side of it, the yachting sector had been seeing some gains in there quite tremendously. Now they remain closed to us. Is there a plan in any time soon for us to be able to accommodate yachts and small boats to come back into St. Lucia?
In the first phase, the yachting sector wasn't considered. What we did was we looked at making sure that we had an environment that we can manage. It is difficult for us to manage a quarantine situation on the seas. It is, it goes against the grain of the sailing product. I've heard suggestions that, you know, the sailors would be disciplined and would actually obey the quarantine requirements, but who knows for sure? I mean, we've seen that where people didn't have to do things within COVID, they didn't do them. And I don't think we can take that risk at this time. And what we have to do is to have a situation where we're absolutely sure. We can't stay closed forever. What we've been saying is that our country will have to coexist with COVID. But while we do so, and while we reopen our economy in a phased approach, what we don't want is to do so in a manner that is not calculated, in a manner that is not clinical, and in a manner that does not take into account the gravity of all the risk that we're taking. And so it is absolutely critical that in reopening, we consider the livelihood of people within the tourism sector, that we consider the lives, the health risk that's associated, and an overall picture of the resuscitation of the St. Lucian economy. But if we focus on any one of those pillars without ensuring that all of the aspirations and all of the objectives are met, then I believe that St. Lucia is going to lose out big time.
In terms of being able now to find budget that will keep us in the market's mind and eye, are we now ramping up what that marketing budget is? How are we trying to find or keep our place on the market without having to break our bank, so to speak?
Well, based on the airline's institution of flights to the destination, we see that the airlines are coming in a rather careful manner. None of the airlines have come back to full capacity where they were pre-COVID for varying reasons. No one wants to fly an empty airplane. So much so, I think as well, no one wants to market a destination with empty hotel rooms. So I think that what we are doing is making sure that we have a very measured and strategic approach, trying to gauge the demand and trying to gauge the market's appetite for traveling now, because there still is a fear, Lisa, for traveling. Let's face it, there are a lot of people that are traveling, and the more people travel, I think that very quickly there will be some bolstered confidence in the manner that people travel and the quantum by which the market comes back. But what we have to do as well is to also scale our budgetary allocations in line with the market trends.
And the relationship that you keep in with the agents, because you need them on the outside. Those are selling the packages for St. Lucia. What has the conversation been
Well,
like
at every
with them?
step of the way, we've been working with our travel agents, working with them to ensure that they're in the loop, what the protocols are. In fact, the coverage on St. Lucia's protocols have been very, very good internationally, where we see that, people were very impressed with the level of proactiveness that we took. We jumped out front. We were driving the Caribbean in this conversation. And what we did is we sought to have a regional approach. And St. Lucia was really ahead of a lot of the other destinations in trying to make this happen. Now, I am glad, Lisa, that we are in a position where we don't have to rush because of extreme fiscal circumstances. Now, some of the other destinations are perhaps in a different place than we are, financially and fiscally. And so the rush to open, perhaps, and the need to open, perhaps is a little more urgent than ours. But I think that we're in a good spot. Our successes have been to make sure that we quarantine, that we isolate, that we do contact tracing, and we do testing to ensure that we're on top of this virus. And, to manage COVID in the manner that we have, tourism reopening, there would be no talk of that if we didn't do the first part right. And all I'm saying to the hoteliers is that let us continue to manage this thing well. Let us continue to safeguard the health and safety of the destination. If the public health situation of the destination is not in good stead, then it is impossible to even talk about marketing tourism to a place where people are largely infected with COVID-19.
The state of emergency, a lot has been said about it and whether it is actually helping the situation economically. And certainly for tourism, we've heard it bandied about that people may be apprehensive about coming to a country where they hear or they're told that a state of emergency is in effect. How do you see that affecting the decision of a visitor to come to the island?
Well, I think that this has been largely politicized. I think that when you ask the average St. Lucian how much their lives have been disrupted, the curfews, yes, maybe getting in a bit earlier, but we've been to the supermarkets, we've been going to each other's homes, we've been going to parks, we've gradually reopened sporting non-contact sports. There's just, life is almost normal in St. Lucia, but we are still going through a global pandemic, and what we need to do is to ensure that we're not complacent, because we're not over yet with this disease. There's still a lot of illegal immigration that's taking place from Martinique with boats that are coming in. And so we can have an outbreak tomorrow if we're not careful. And so the state of emergency, Lisa, just gives the government the flexibility that if something goes wrong, that tomorrow we can quickly act to immediately take steps that are necessary to save the rest of the population from COVID-19. That's all this is about. And so that's all we've been saying. In addition to that, I think we needed the state of emergency. It allowed us the mechanism to get the Cuban Medical Brigade licensed and approved to practice in St. Lucia quickly. And that has been a very important component of our management of this pandemic. So that was absolutely critical, and government having the flexibility to do it. But we continue to listen to everyone and to take their feedback. Where we see merit in suggestions, we're going to respond to them, but I don't think that what we will do is respond to the desperate political attempts by people to scare people and to create scaremongering. I think that this has been rather unfortunate, and it has no place in what we're trying to do, especially at a time that we are in this global pandemic. I mean, this whole thing about the charcoal thing, this law has been around since 1978. And I mean, it is really unfortunate, Lisa. Think of you bringing home your newborn baby from the hospital, and then I go, yes, it is my right to do charcoal. And then I make a charcoal pit, and then that charcoal pit then releases smoke into the nostrils of your baby that has just come from the hospital. Or it could be your grandmother who's asthmatic in the house, or it could be your child who's asthmatic. And so this is not about trying to cause people or prevent them from earning a daily living. This is absolutely ridiculous, those suggestions. What we are trying to do is to make sure that we give everyone an opportunity to earn their living, but when it comes to doing it in residential areas, you really should have regard for your neighbors, their health, their safety. And I know that the public health, Mr. Ragnanan, has actually explained that beautifully and eloquently in ensuring that what we have to do is do our thing in a responsible manner. Look at the recent explosion we had in cul-de-sac at a local business place. That was because someone was welding without proper guidelines. And then people lost their lives. Many are injured. People have lost limbs, legs. So basically what this has been trying to do, and they've been working on it for several years, is to try to ensure not just charcoal, but charcoal was the only thing that was taken out from the regulations. But there was welding, there was pig pens that sometimes can be done in residential areas, and the stench, chicken coops, and so on. It's to ensure that we have some standards, that while we earn our living, we don't affect our neighbors, and we don't cause undue harm and inconvenience to them and their families. And so this is what that really was about.
On the Airbnb legislation, what is the process that you're going through with it now? Because you had held it back and for review. Can you tell us at what stage are you at now with the revision of that particular legislation?
Again, scaremongering. There's no judge there's no case that I have seen. And the penalties that have been highlighted in the Airbnb legislation is akin to what happens in VAT. The Airbnb person is not the person that we're taxing. You are not the taxpayer, but you are the collector of the tax from the tourists, as is done all over the world. And so if you're collecting state funds, then you have an obligation to put those funds into the state. Now, we have had VAT. Do you know anyone that have been to jail for flouting or picking up VAT and not remitting to the government? It is a similar piece of legislation, it is a similar penalty. So when I did the analysis, and we were looking at this following the debate, an Airbnb person, the average Airbnb, the rate is about $60 to $85. If you're picking up a 4% VAT at $60, or let's use 50 because it's easier to calculate, it would mean the average Airbnb person would pick up $2 a night. Now, let's go worst case scenario that you are full for 365 days in the year, which is impossible. It doesn't happen. But yet, let's use this as a guide. What you will have, Lisa, is someone picking up $800. Do you believe in your right mind that if you had to go to court for $800 US, that a judge will give you the maximum penalty of $100,000? I don't think so. And so the advice I've had, the legal and the judicial advice I've had, that there are even guidelines on how magistrates conduct themselves and how they would judge a situation such as the one that we're speaking of. And so there has just been a lot of scaremongering. The taxpayer is not the Airbnb. You charge whatever price you want. All we're saying is that we're asking you to pick up a 4% tax on the tourist. This is a tax on tourists. The Airbnb person is the tax collector and not the taxpayer. So no one is trying to cause people from renting their homes. The bill is called the tourism levy bill. So how are we going to now mislead people by telling them that if you're renting a residential apartment, that you too are going to be taxed? That is absolutely false. And so what we've seen is that as we get into this season, the politicians are very active. And what they're doing is they're miscuing a lot of the facts, and they're doing everything possible to try to scare people and try to make the government unpopular. And I understand that's what opposition parties do. And that's what you need to do to try to win an election. But I think what is unfortunate is that you're misleading people at the same time and not giving people the true picture of what is actually taking place.
And to the revision that your department is engaged in right now, it is looking at specifically the penalty aspect of the bill, because contained in the bill are some very good elements for people who are engaged in the Airbnb business, not so?
Well, absolutely. It creates standards. I mean, the safety of Airbnbs all over the world has come into question. And should you find yourself where something happens, Lisa, it's not just the Airbnb sector that will be affected, but hotels, I mean, the thousands of jobs that are now in the sector are also going to be at risk. And so it's important to have standards to ensure that health and safety is taken care of the visitor, of the worker, of the investor. And we can't be playing a guess game with our main sector. I mean, is that how the Labour Party wants us to govern the country? To just say, let's have a free-for-all and let's do as we please? No, you can't. You absolutely cannot have any industry that will be sustainable without regulation. You have to have something in place to manage the situation. And so, therefore, what I want to say to you is that we want to give people concessions. We want people who don't qualify today, that if you would like to renovate one of your apartments or upgrade it to get into tourism, that you're able to do so. Presently, only hotels are able to do so. And so what we're doing through the Village Tourism Act, which we are going to be bringing to Parliament very soon, is to empower St. Lucians to be able to get the concessions that they so deserve.
And that village tourism concept, how do you see us being able to roll it out now? Or are we looking to put that on pause, given
No, we are moving full
is?
steam ahead. The organization will be established to begin to add the structure and to give, they've got to do their strategic planning, they've got to do their visioning, and to ensure that they're in a good place so that when COVID disappears, that we are ready to go back into tourism. I think we've got to be prepared. We've got to make sure our marketing is right. We've got to make sure that all the structures and all the mechanisms are in place for us to come back strong with COVID, to compete. This destination, we've done some incredible things before COVID. We've had a record-breaking year where for the first time we've seen 423,000 visitors coming via airplanes. We've had the most visitors in the last calendar year, some 1.3 million. That's the most we've ever had visit this country. And so we've had a successful destination. The changes we've made at the Tourism Authority are right. The changes we've made at the Ministry of Tourism have yielded tremendous results. And we're seeing that a change in our marketing strategies have worked significantly. I don't think anyone can argue that. But what we want to make sure is that we don't be overly anxious about what is taking place now. We have to open. The government supports opening. We were the ones that were proactive. We set up the task force. We corralled the forces of the hoteliers and we said, let's now discuss what we're going to do. We engage hoteliers as it pertains to establishing protocols to make sure that those protocols that are put in place, that they are workable and they're practical. And then when we got to the level of the airline, that's where we had some hiccups, and that's where we have to now go back to the drawing board and review the protocols in a very clinical fashion. I don't think that at this time panicking will work and misrepresenting the facts will actually work.
I think there's some confusion still with the public when it comes to the tourism levy bill and dealing with the Airbnb. You are looking to have persons who are not formally into the Airbnb subsector to now register themselves as being part of the sector. Is that the correct understanding?
For many years, you see that even before Airbnb, there were villas all over St. Lucia, and no one knew where they were. There were people coming through the airport and said that they were staying at XYZ, and you couldn't find them. And then you hear that there is something that happens at a particular villa, and the tourists were staying at that villa, and there were no taxes being paid, there were no licenses, there were no standards. You just cannot continue to manage an industry in this day and age. It is not responsible, and it is not the right thing to do. And so if the Labour Party, if they have managed to convince people, and if they see that this is the politically convenient thing to do, then so be it for them. But Lisa, I have got to go by the conviction. We're not taxing Airbnb people. The taxes to tourists. We don't want to throw anyone in jail. We don't want to send anyone out of business. When you go to court, I mean, take for example people that have that go to court for drug substances, right? If you go to court and the amount of drugs you're in possession with, do you believe as a minor offender that you are going to attract the same penalty as the maximum offender? What's the point of a law if there's no penalty? There absolutely is no point to it. You cannot put millions of taxpayers' money, and this is not, we keep talking about Airbnb, it is not targeting Airbnbs. It is the accommodation sector, which also include hotels. Most of the rooms in St. Lucia that will be picking up the taxes, there are 4,500 hotel rooms, and there are only about 600 Airbnb that are listed. And so clearly we're not targeting the Airbnb people. Clearly who we are targeting, we're targeting the hotel or the formal accommodation sector to ensure that if they collect taxes, that they will pay. I mean, in the previous regime of HAT, and the former Prime Minister Kenny Anthony is on record of saying that the hotels owe millions of dollars from the hotel accommodation tax, which predated VAT. And so now all of these uncollected revenues, you've got to make sure that the law is sufficient to allow the government to be able to collect its revenue. And that's all it's about. It is not targeting Airbnb. It's a tourism levy bill, and it is for tourism accommodation providers. What we want to do instead, Lisa, is to empower St. Lucians to get involved in tourism. All we have done, there's been an increased amount of awareness. There have been an increased amount of applications from locals who have applied to our ministry to get concessions to do small businesses. If you check the records, last year alone we did over 60 small businesses in all different subsectors within the tourism sector. I give you a story. The opposition that is now talking about supporting locals. There is a very famous local hotel up in the north. They've been in tourism for 30 years, and they have been let down so badly by the system. They qualify. The lady who I admire so well has built this industry on her back, and she's built it with her own money, and not a single dollar of concession from no government. And we want to say today, because it is politically convenient that we support the small man, it is the St. Lucia Labour Party administration that gave a major hotel concessions to import a boat, a catamaran boat, to do excursions. That is unprecedented. A sector that is reserved for St. Lucians. And this administration has always ensured that we have reserved it for locals. They have given that hotel concessions to go and bring a boat to compete with locals. And you want to suggest that you care about the small man? It is the St. Lucia Labour Party administration that gave concessions to a major hotel in St. Lucia to bring in their diesel duty-free. That is unprecedented and against the Tourism Stimulus and Investment Act. Now, I'm not into naming hotels. I will never do that. It is the St. Lucia Labour Party administration, Lisa, and I say it again, that has structured a bill that has totally outlawed I would say they have sidelined local businesses. They have given big businesses an unfair advantage over locals in the Tourism Stimulus and Investment Act, where it has a tier system where all of the investors that are above, I think it starts from about 10 million US dollars. There's no local person that is investing in an Airbnb spends 25 million EC dollars. And what they have done is that they have structured the bill that only those hotels that are above $10 million in investment that can get their banks to give them a tax credit. So when you were in government, you never did anything to ensure that 6 rooms or less can benefit from concessions, because all they have done is do something differently in government from what they do in opposition. And I am tired of seeing this kind of disingenuousness. I am tired of seeing this disingenuous nature from the St. Lucia Labour Party. Come right, speak the facts to the people, because when you were in government, you actually supported big businesses only and did nothing for small tourism businesses. I want them, Lisa, and I challenge them now to name one policy prescription that they have legislated to allow small tourism businesses to thrive. There is none. Absolutely none, zero. And this is why when we came in that we were so committed to village tourism, because we see that this is going to give the small people the opportunity to be able to invest in their businesses.
Okay. In terms of the tourism levy bill, do you have a date as to when the revised version will be tabled again before Parliament?
No, we want to make sure we overhaul the legislation to improve upon it. We are taking the time now to meet with a lot of stakeholders, including Airbnb owners, to make sure that everyone is comfortable, that we clear up the lie. I mean, I say a lie, and I say that Dr. Ernest Hillier lied to the people of St. Lucia when he used one line, one section in a legislation that has about 35 to 40 sections, and that is completely false. So what we want to do is take some time to make everyone understand what is in the legislation. It is the tourism levy bill. How come you're going to somehow suggest to people that are renting residential property that they too are going to be exposed to the bill? That is completely false.
Okay. For the region, with your hat as the Caribbean Tourism Organization's chairman, when you speak on the regional end of things, how do you see the harmonization of what the islands are doing working out? Because we have heard that the leaders have taken particular positions. However, we do see that the islands are deviating from what a common position, a stated common position is. So how is the CTO managing how the islands harmonize in their response to COVID-19?
It's a collective approach between CHTA, CTO, OECS Secretariat, working as well with CARICOM, CARFA, and as many regional bodies as possible to see how best we can institute a policy that is uniformed so that we have one set of standards for the Caribbean. That is the goal and the aspiration, but it's difficult to get 15 governments to work together. And so what we will do is to continue to work with each other to see how we can have a common position on all of the issues, but I think that what we're going to do at this present time is to make sure that St. Lucia is not left behind and that St. Lucia goes forward with its opening, and we work with our stakeholders, particularly the airline, to unravel solutions to the conflicts that we have at this time.
Okay, and so we'll end where we began. The president for the SLHTA did request in the letter a meeting with the Honorable Prime Minister, and I suppose that would be extended to you as well as part of being one of the relevant ministers to the discussion. Has there been any indication as to whether this meeting will take place, and if it is, when is it likely to happen?
Well, the letter was addressed to the Prime Minister, so I would rather him respond. All I am saying is that my team have been working very, very hard. I think that the suggestion that there has been no consultation is a slap in the face to me and my team, because we have made ourselves available even on Saturdays outside of normal government working hours. We've been called at midnight by members of the SLHTA to answer questions. We've been up very, very late on Zoom meetings, and all we've been doing is accommodating the Hotel Association. And it's very unfortunate that they would suggest that consultation has not taken place.
Right. Want to thank you very much, the Minister for Tourism, Information, Broadcasting, Creative Industries. Thank you so much for taking the time off to come and clear up some of those matters for us. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Melissa Joseph, signing off from the Information Command Center.
She's been watching, waiting, wondering when the sands of time will give way to a tide of change, and for yesterday and today to become a new tomorrow. For a time when her sun can kiss the cheeks of your loved one and her stars can twinkle in her honeymoon skies. When her earthly embrace will reassure and calm your soul. And her unique view can change your whole perspective. Proudly, she has risen to meet new challenges and to provide safe harbor to all who reach her shores. For her hopes and dreams still stand, shoulder to shoulder, a precious reminder of experiences yet to come. So, wherever your moments and memories take you, let her sense of adventure set you free. She is St. Lucia.